Hey YouTube, it's Monday. Let's see, October, I don't remember the date. I think it's the 12th. But anyway, we got some rain falling today. It's like a little more than a drizzle. But that's good because we could use the rain. I was up at the house today and was polyurethane and some things up there, the windowsills mainly. And I'm going to do a little video again on this planer on how to use it. Okay, so if you look here, you can see that I have the planer up all the way. And what I just want to show you underneath here, there's three rollers. There's this roller, this is the in-feed roller, okay? There's the roller back here, which is the out-feed roller. And then there's the roller in the middle there that has the cutting blade on it. Now when you turn this on, all three things start to roll, okay? And the rollers here are pretty tight where they're at. They don't really move around too much, but they do compress a little bit because there's a rubber on them and stuff. But the rubber's to help the thing to pull the board through as you need it. So the idea behind the planer then is you put the board in, the in-feed roller grabs a hold of the board and pulls it through. The cutter will cut it, and let's see here. Yeah. So the low part of the cutter is about a 64th or so. The cutter blade is about a 64th or so above where these two rollers are. So they do compress a little bit, and then you end up getting a nice plane from the knife. The problem with these planers is that their motors on them are very small, so you know they don't have a lot of how can I say, horsepower to them. So they have to make it so that you're not pulling in and cutting off a lot of wood at one time. So the main thing here is if you look on the top, and this just gives you a little bit of information, like say this dial here, it starts at 0. Okay, so we're going to put 0 by this line right here basically. And if you move it, like say in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you move it a part of a turn, okay, it'll cut a 64th inch off. Another will cut a 32nd, that's twice as much. Then 3 times, which is 3/64ths, and then a 1/16 of an inch, okay? And then obviously if you turn it all the way, you get back to, it's a 1/16 plus another 64th. So really it's 1, 2, 3, 4 64ths if you go all the way around there. But nonetheless, that's the maximum that you can cut. And the way that they make it so that it's the maximum is this guard right here. Okay, this guard that's on here, right underneath the word craftsman, this is a heavy piece of metal here. So this guard is flat all the way across. The other one here, the part or cable, has a little piece of metal sticking down in the middle where you can't cut you know, more than a certain amount of wood on this one. On the porter cable you could actually cut a little bit more. So anyway, this is the guide. So when you crank this down, the handle, when you crank the handle down and you're bringing the machine to the point where it's going to do its cutting, you have to realize that if you can't get past this, you're not going to do any planing. So the maximum amount of planing you can do is like 4 64ths. And the problem here with planing wood is that wood is not perfectly straight. That's just the nature of the beast. I mean, when I look down that board there, you can see there's a little bend in the middle of it. Now, so much wood can go through this thing. This whole setup here is probably, I don't know, no more than 2 feet at the most wide to be able to, you know, get a board through. So that means that 2 foot of a board that's crooked, like say if you have, this board has a little bend in the middle, it's very little, but the board will still go through, and it may make a little bit of a dive. You know, it's not going to be much, it's going to be very little, you're hardly going to notice it if you can. And that's what does the planing. You know, when you put the board through, the rollers grab it, pull it through, and then it planes it. Once you put the board through one time, you have got to adjust the handle, because it doesn't keep cutting, it doesn't automatically adjust, it only cuts once. Now, if you're really putting pressure down on this thing and forcing a piece of wood through, you may get a little bit of wood off the second cut. But normally you only cut one cut. You got to turn the handle. So if you're, and you can look at the gauge here for the measurement as you're going. So when I'm cutting boards, like let's say I'm planing something that's 5 inches thick, and I want to plane it. I want to plane it down to 4.5 inches, let's just say. Or better yet, let me go down to 4 inches, which is more something that we would actually do. Okay, so we're at 4 inches there, okay? Right there's 4 inches. So that means that the opening here is going to plane right at 4 inches wide. Okay, if you put a board through there and it fits and it cuts it, it'll make the board exactly 4 inches. Now, if the board is slightly less than that, then you have to turn this down. You might have to turn it down a whole half or, you know, 3/4 of a turn. It's up to you, whatever you're going to need to fit the board in. And when I say fit it in, what I mean is the board is just underneath this guide so that it can get in there. I mean, it can't go in if it's against it, obviously. So then you make a cut, and let's say it takes off a, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's actually taking a 1/10 of an inch off. That's what they're judging here. So here's 3, there's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 1/10 of an inch. So that's with every line that you have there. Now I basically use 2 and a little bit, or 2 1/4. 2 1/2 is actually 1/4 of an inch. So let's say I made a cut and it took it down to this. Now I have to put the board through again, but what I have to do is I have to turn the crank down a little bit. Okay, so I turn it down and then I go through again. The whole purpose of this is to save the motor power that you get, the power you get with this little motor. The motor's only this, you know, big up in here, like from here to here. That's it. So you don't have a whole lot of power there, but they're good little motors. The motor on that still runs really great. The only thing wrong with this is the in-feed roller. From grabbing a hole of stuff with the in-feed roller, it kind of tore this rubber off of it. And it does dry. It also absorbs a little bit of moisture, and you got to be careful, because if you have too much moisture in this, it won't pull the wood through. It kind of just pushes down on it, and you don't want it to keep riding on a piece of wood without it pulling through, because that's not how it works. You have to be able to pull it through to cut. So anyway, every time you make a cut, okay, you have got to adjust this handle. So if I make a cut, let's say it's at 0 and I make a cut, and it doesn't matter where this is at, you know, if no matter where it is. So I make a cut, now it says here down with the head. So this is the way you have to turn it counterclockwise to make the head go down. So if I go ahead and I put a board through here, and let's say it fits and it cuts through, planes the board, I have to turn this anywhere between 1 turn, okay, 1 full turn. So in other words, I can stop here, I can stop here, I can stop anywhere, but I can't go over this full turn because it won't allow me to put another board through. I have to stay back there a little bit. So again, you're looking at basically a 3/64 inch of a cut. It's not a lot of wood that it takes off. That's why you see me putting the boards through there so many times. Okay, but I don't mind doing that, especially on short stuff like spindles, because you can stand in one place and work it through. On something long like these handrails here, I put rollers on each side so that the roller can keep the, like you can set the board on the plate here, and the roller will hold it up on the plate on the going in, and I can also put a roller on the opposite side so that when the board comes out, it'll rest on the roller on its way out. The difficult thing here is you can adjust the roller perfectly with the flat of this, with a flat plate of the planer. The problem is if the board's got any kind of a bow or bend or kink or little bit of resistance to it, it's going to show up when it comes across the roller. It's either going to be above the roller, slightly below the roller, but it's not going to always be at the roller. Even after you've planed it, sometimes the boards still pull. And the planer in-feed and out-feed rollers is what straightens it out to get it to plane the board. It's not really hard to use, and once you understand how it works, it's actually easy to use. And the good thing about this is, you know, people are saying, oh, you can't use that little planer to cut these boards. I have cut with that planer there close to 8,000 board feet of wood. I planed it. Now, you know, you can say whatever you want, but if the planer is made to be self-protecting, you know, and you use it within those limits, that's the way it is. And that's how this one's made, the same thing. This one's actually even made to last longer because it doesn't give you that, like the other planer has a small piece here that sticks down. So that means you can get a wider board on both sides. This one you get one size board in there. That tells me that it's saving what I need for this motor to work. It's saving itself as it works. So I'll try and explain that a little bit better as I go here. Okay, so let me show you this in another way. The bottom of these two boards is even. One's out further than the other, but you can take my word for it that they're even on the bottom. The top of them, though, is not even. That means one board was slightly thicker than another. And you're talking there probably 1/8 of an inch, okay, right where that black line is. So here's what I'm trying to say here. If you take this board with this one, the both of them, and you stick them in the planer and you adjust the planer down to whatever size you need to be able to get them in there, and I'll just show you in a second here. So I'm going to go down to 2 inches. Okay, so right there's 2 inches. So the bigger one, let's say. Okay, so we put the bigger board here and we're going to put it in there, and you can see it's slightly thinner than 2 inches. Okay, so that means that you've got to tighten up on this a little bit to be able to get it to work good for you. So what we can do is we can go down a little further until it's just a hair off of that, and then the roller will grab it, pull it through and cut it, okay, plane it. But if you take this other board that's thinner than that one and you put it in here, you're going to get a cut, but it's going to be a little bit thinner cut, okay, because it's slightly below the metal guard here than what the other one is, because the other board is a little bit thicker. And that's why putting multiple boards into the planer at one time doesn't really work, because all the boards are different sizes and that is why they can't go in all at one time. I mean, you can probably put 5 boards across here and put them in there, and maybe you'll cut 2 or 3, or maybe none, or maybe 1, and that's why you can't cut them all. So putting them in, like, you know, more than one at a time isn't going to help you. So not in my opinion. I mean, it might work, but I doubt it. Now, once you get them all cut to the same size, and do you really want to try and figure out what size they all are? That's why I put them through, and that's why I'm always using that handle to follow and find where I want my 1 3/4 inches. So that's the size of the board I want. And that's just how this thing works. Okay guys, so not to confuse you, because we're talking about a bunch of rollers here. In the planer, there's an in-feed, a cutting roller, and then there's an out-feed roller. Now the roller I was talking about here before was this one. So you put one of these rollers, it's just a stand. You put one roller on one side and one roller on the opposite side. I don't have one over there, but you'd put one over here. So when the board goes through, like an 8-footer, if you put this roller just about an inch or two behind 4 foot from the center of the cutter, when you put the board through, and you do the same thing with the other roller that would be over out here, the board will go through, get planed, and then rest on the other roller, and it won't fall on the ground. The boards falling on the ground is a little bit of a nuisance if they do, because even if you're in your garage, because anything that gets on the board is going to dull the blade. But you know, that's should be obvious. But anyway, so you adjust this roller here then to be even with the cutting surface, or not the cutting surface, but the riding surface. So in other words, this black plate, the silver plate that's in there, and the other black plate, you want to line them all up so that this is just a hair underneath that, or at least right at it is the best actually when you're in feeding, which is this direction. So what I'm saying though about a bent board is, let's say you have a bend in a board and you know the bend is on the bottom like this. When you put the board through, the board will go through the planer, especially if it's not a bad bend. It'll go through the planer, but when it comes out the opposite side, the board's going to want to shoot up in the air a little bit. So it's going to be way above the roller. So because it's above the roller, when you run it through, you may get a pretty heavy snipe at one end of the board. Now it all depends on how bad it is. Sometimes you don't get any snipe depending upon you know how heavy or how hard you're pressing the wood to go through the planer. But the other thing is, like, let's say the board's aiming downward, like bent like my fingers are like that, and I know it's a little drastic, but so you put the board in there and it's cutting, everything is fine, but when it comes out the other side, because the board is bent down, it ends up being below the cutter instead of riding, or it ends up being below the roller like this, that would be over here. So the problem with that is that it knocks the roller over, or you know, if it's in sawdust, it's going to push it up in the air and then cause it to be higher anyway, and then none of the boards are going to ride on it, and that's a little bit of a hassle. So if you work with nice straight lumber, and you should be, then you would have no trouble with this. So that's just a little bit of a thing on this planer that I've given you here. If you have any questions, you can ask. I'll try to explain it better if I can. I like the planer because it's quick and it's pretty easy. You just got to keep in mind, you know, the size dimension you want, because sometimes depending upon how the cutter's going and the cut that you made on some of your boards, you may end up being a little smaller than what you really want. So you got to watch that closely, and all I watch is the measuring guide. That's all I take into myself, what I'm talking about with the you know, what to keep an eye on. I just watch where it measures, because that's what I'm needing. So anyway guys, I hope that helps you to understand this a little bit better, and like I say, there's not a lot to it, but if you have questions, go ahead and ask. Have a good one.